Brandon, I want to thank you for the opportunity for letting me speak tonight. Um, on the BES website, in the Show More scripture for the Brit Hadashah, you will find Romans 12, 1 and 2. Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living and holy sacrifice, pleasing to God, which is your spiritual, in quotes here, inward, not outward, service of worship. And do not be conformed to this world or its age, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you may discover what the will of Adonai is, that which is good, pleasing, and perfect. Many of our brothers and sisters in Messiah are affectionately dubbed the Sunday people, are both celebrating and mourning the death of Yeshua today. We may not all agree on the timeline or the fact that we're observing this outside of Passover, but Messiah is worthy to be praised each and every time. I think we should celebrate and mourn with them. We shall celebrate him again at Passover. 1 Corinthians says 5:7, Yeshua is our Passover lamb. Yeshua is many things. One, he's our perfect sacrifice from Hebrews 10:12. Two, he's our priest, the great high priest outlined in Hebrews chapter 4 through 10. And number three, he is our forever king from the lineage of David in 2 Samuel 7:16. Tonight, I want to focus on his priesthood. That'll come as no shock to anyone who attends Midrash with me. I enjoy all the finer things of the priesthood and the giants and the red heifers and all things that are not the main thing, okay? I attended church for, 30, 35 years before I heard anything about the royal priesthood. Paraphrasing 1 Peter 2 and Hebrews 8, we can celebrate today that Yeshua offered a perfect sacrifice for everyone and attained as one of his roles, the high priest. In Hebrews 7:17, it says, "For it is attested of Yeshua, you are a high priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek." So Melchizedek in Hebrew, 2 words, it means king of righteousness. We could call this the royal priesthood. I want you to think about that. Paraphrasing in Romans 8, Messiah has set us free from sin and the second or final death. And we are free to walk. And this analogy is going to be used a lot tonight for me. Walk means living our lives. And if we are living in the Spirit, then Adonai accepts us as his own. This mental image for me is that Joseph brings Ephraim and Manasseh to Jacob, and he adopts them. We are children of Adonai. And if we are children, then heirs. And if heirs, we have an inheritance. We share an inheritance with Messiah. Does this mean that we can also share in Yeshua's royal priesthood, the Melchizedek? In 1 Peter 2:9, and I think he is referencing Exodus 19, verses 5 and 6. Perhaps we need to speak about this at Midrash. You are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, Adonai's possession, so that you may testify to the wonderful acts of God who called you out of moral and physical darkness. So according to 1 Peter 2:9, you and I are of a royal priesthood. So what do priests do? So if we go back to the Levitical priesthood, the first thing they did, the first thing they are responsible for is to offer various types of sacrifices on the behalf of the people. If we look back at Romans 12:1, which was the verses I used tonight, in part, we are offering a living sacrifice by rejecting covetousness, lust, and pride. We're also continuously repenting and turning back to Teshuvah and renewing our minds with Scripture. On this same line of thought, offering sacrifices, in Hebrews 13, 15, and 16, through Yeshua, we continually offer up a sacrifice of praise to Adonai, that is the fruit of the lips, praising his name, and do not neglect doing good and sharing with such sacrifices. In such Adonai is pleased. So continually praising and worshiping and returning to him, right? Number two, we are caring for the physical space of worshiping and ensuring its cleanliness and sanctity. 1 Corinthians 3:16, you are a temple of God, and the Spirit of God dwells in you. Matthew 5, 13 and 14, in the Sermon on the Mount, he says that you are salt and light. We talk about this a lot in Midrash, about salt and light. You are to enhance, preserve, and positively influence those around you. Ephesians 2, 19 and 21, and this is my translation. Just because there's key words here that I think are important when we talk about this verse. You are no longer aliens or Gentiles. You know, the mixed multitude that traveled with Israel, they weren't Israel, they were aliens, they were gers. But you are Israel with the rest of God's people, and you are God's household. You have been built on the foundation of apostles and prophets, Yeshua Messiah being the cornerstone. In him, the whole building being fitted together is growing into a holy temple in Adonai. Notice the family or communal language there. There are several teachers that would say it's not possible to have a personal relationship with Yeshua. I don't know what you think about that. You might want to ponder that as we leave here tonight. You know, that is a phrase that we hear a lot of people say, to have a personal relationship. I think the scriptures teach us that we are to be a community of believers. We can certainly worship and serve individually, but when we bring our resources and our gifts and our time together, we are larger than the sum of our parts. We're greater than that. Beth El Shaddai is much more than its individual people. Number three, priests are responsible for instructing the people in the laws of God and explaining their significance. You should immediately think about the Great Commission, right? Matthew 28, 18 and 20. Again, all authority, jurisdiction. He didn't just say, I have authority. It was given to him. He was given jurisdiction. Has been given to me, and I am telling you to go and make students, followers of all nations, of Gentiles, of non-Israelites. Teach them to keep my commandments, and I am always with you all the time until the end of this age. So another great story or another great account in the New Testament about instructing people in the laws of God and explaining their significance is Peter and the eunuch. In Acts 8:30, Philip ran up to the eunuch and heard him reading Isaiah the prophet. And he said, do you understand what it is you're reading? And he said, how can I unless someone guides me? And that's our role sometimes as well. He invited Philip to come up and sit with him. So now tonight I have made a claim that you and I are priests based on Scripture. Maybe that's a job you do not want, right? If we use the walking analogy about living our lives in our walk, some of us are walking tough terrain right now. Some of us aren't making a whole lot of ground. Some of us are very fit and we are running at our best and we are looking at the next station in our race. Neither of which do we have time necessarily for someone else, right? I've got it rough, or I'm living my best life now, and I don't necessarily have the time or the energy to help someone else. And let's be honest, when we see a need, sometimes we have an internal dialogue about, do I have time for this? Do I have money for this? Is this going to become a new thing on top of the other stuff I have? And I certainly have those internal questions. And sometimes I'm obedient, but sometimes I'm not. Matthew 16:25, however, says, whoever wants to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. We have to give of ourselves even when we can't necessarily afford it or think we can't afford it. In terms of time, money, resources, all the above. Yeshua is emphasizing the idea that true life and fulfillment are found not in selfishly pursuing your own walk with its desires and interests, but in selflessly surrendering your walk to follow Yeshua, to live in the Spirit and to serve others. Walk is a great analogy for life, living life. And where do we know a great parable that Yeshua told us in the New Testament? I don't normally ask questions. Can anybody answer that? What's the great parable of people walking and people helping? Okay, I'll go. How about a journey that's 18 miles from Jerusalem to Jericho? And in it, an Israelite happens onto some robbers. And they beat him up, right? And they strip him. And they take I think they take his cloak when it says they strip him. And they beat him, and he went away, leaving him half dead. And so by coincidence, a priest, a Cohen, walked by, and when he saw him, he passed on the other side. He went to the other side of the street. And also a Levite saw the same thing, and he too passed on the other side. But then the Samaritan, and we talk about on the news, we see the Good Samaritan did this and the Good Samaritan did that. And sometimes the backstory is not there. Samaritans, a despised neighbor to the north, who intermarried with Israelites, created their own brand of worshiping Adonai, was walking by as well. And he stops what he is doing. He stops his journey. By the way, Samaria is nowhere near Jerusalem to Jericho. And so he wasn't headed home. I don't know what he was doing. But he took the time to care for this Israelite. He takes him to a hotel. If today's standard of, if the minimum wage today is $15, then he gave the innkeeper or the hotel keeper about $180. And he said, I'm going to come back and check on this guy. And so that was not convenient. That was not, hey, here's $5 for gas. I hope everything works out. He took his time. And as I was preparing for tonight, just kind of thinking back on my notes, this Samaritan is a marginalized portion of the census there, of the community. He's not well liked because of who and what he is. He's got a wife and kids probably. He's probably working. He's probably hoping, I need to make enough money to buy clothes for my children, and I hope the crop does well this year. All the same things you and I are going through, just might be different in terms of time. his day was disrupted, and he did what he thought was best. Yeshua said of this parable, go and do the same. So in conclusion, let me leave you with this. Matthew chapter 5, Yeshua is delivering his Sermon on the Mount. And around verse 38, it's the eye for an eye and a tooth for the tooth. And if a person wants your tunic, give him your cloak. But in terms of analogy of walk, he also says this, whoever forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. And we all know the backstory there is probably that the Romans there could press you into service and say, take this equipment and walk with me. And they could make you walk 1 mile. And Yeshua says, walk with him 2 miles. By the way, that's a double portion. Okay? And we should hold those who marginalize us in esteem. And I say all that to say, it's tough for me. I have that internal dialogue about, have I got the time? Have I got the resources? And we should just submit. We should submit to our royal priest, who today is being celebrated and mourned. And with that, I will say Shabbat Shalom.